British Drama Toolkit by Spitfire for brass and reeds. What does it sound like? How do you use it and who is it for? Let's take a deeper look. Hi there, this is Sam with Second Tier Sound. Really nice to see you here. Now, creating these videos on YouTube is really fun, but I can only do that if I get the support from people like you. And how can you do that, you might ask? Well, you can obviously watch my videos, hit a like and subscribe and leave a comment. That is really helpful and really thank you for that. But you can also become a patron or you can give me a thanks, and all the links are below. And that way I might be able to create my courses that I'm working on much faster. So thank you so much for your support, and let's get on with the review. This instrument is actually part of a series. The first one is called simply British Drama Toolkit. It's a very popular instrument in Spitfire, where you have a bunch of solo acoustic instruments and some ensembles that lend themselves really well to putting content in the background of TV shows and drama shows, where you don't want to interfere with the dialogue too much. The second installment was called, or is called, Contemporary Drama Toolkit, where you have a bunch of synthesizers doing the same thing. And now the third installment is a British Drama Toolkit, brass and reeds. Now they all work really similarly, so if you work with the other libraries, this will be nothing new to you, except for now they're using their own engine instead of a Kontakt engine. But if you haven't seen these libraries before, you should check this out, because the approach here is a little bit different than normal virtual libraries. And I actually was a little bit confused in the beginning, even though it's not difficult to play, how you actually use this. But now I know, and I'm going to show you. So let's get going. Here it is, the spanking new interface of the British Drama Toolkit. The older libraries of British Drama Toolkit are in the Kontakt engine. The difference is that now Spitfire has control over their own samples, and it's a bigger, more clear interface, I find, and you can also scale it, which is fantastic. Well, up here you load all the instruments. We have combinations, we have brass instruments, even individual instruments as well, like tuba, bass, tenor trombone, tenor horn and flugelhorn. And then we have reeds, a contrabass bassoon, a coranglais and an oboe. And then we have recorders, and it's only one ensemble because recorders sound so similar that it wouldn't really make any sense to have different instruments. Just one big ensemble and you get all of them pretty much. And then you have saxophones. You can also just load the bass saxophone or the alto saxophone. So let's start with the combos here and explain a little bit how this instrument works. You probably will spend the most time here. It's very easy to play. You can just think as a piano player. You can just hit any chord and you get a really nice result. Let's try this one, the brass and alto sax. So you can see there's a lot going on there, and all those swells I didn't do. They are recorded, and each note is a little bit different. There's movements, some notes going on, some rhythms, some swelling going on there. And this is what makes this instrument so alive and interesting, and this is perfect for media composing. Now, what is this thing here, the modulation wheel? Let's move this one. Nothing happens. Well, you hear changes, but that's not me. That's just the sounds doing that themselves. As you can see here, depending on how hard I hit the keys, I get different results. So if I move this up here until the soft layer, you can see it says soft layer right here. Then no matter how soft I hit, I won't be able to go lower than that. So let's try that again. I can go louder, obviously, but not softer. So that is a way they can help me out. So it says texture, soft and loud, and it's basically different notes, different textures, different way of hearing the note. But it's in the combos also a way of hearing different instruments. And this is how it works. If you take this name here, it says brass and alto sax. That means on the lower dynamics, the lower velocities, it will be a brass sound, any of the brass instruments, depending on the register. Now, on the higher velocities, I will hear the alto sax in this case. So let's play really softly here. That was a brass sound. If I hit much harder, I'll get the alto sax. Now, also depending where I hit, I get different attacks, depending a little bit on the sound. The saxes are quite slow in their attacks, but other instruments, on the loud, you get a quicker attack. You can actually control a lot more how you want your chords to sound. For example, if you have a normal sustain patch of strings or brass, if you play a chord and then use your mod wheel to do a nice swell or control the volume, all of the instruments will have exactly the same volume. But quite often in those ensemble patches, you feel like, oh God, that middle note is sticking out like a sore thumb and I can't do anything about it because if I change the volume on that one, I'm going to change the volume of anything else. But now you can. So if I take a chord, maybe I want the lower note to be more dominant. Same chord. Different sound because now it's also sax playing. But I hope you get the idea. You can always control this in your DAW. So let's say the middle note is going to be the more dominant one. Or the top one. I cannot just voice my chords, I can also orchestrate them in a way in terms of volume. So you get a lot of combinations here. You have brass and reeds. Those are basically all of those instruments in that group. All the brass, all the reeds. Here you have just the oboe on top of brass, and here just the choring lay. So all of these different patches are just combinations of all the instruments that exist. So you just pick one that you like. Brass and recorders, let's try that one. Now, I forgot to mention that you can obviously use the expression layer. You can still this is not a dynamic recorded sample, it's just a volume control. Let's see if we have anything else we want to try here. Saxes and brass, the other way around. There's one thing I want to show you here also that is quite important. Here you have the round robin options. Basically, what's happening when you hit the key again, is it going to be exactly the same sample or it's just going to be a little bit different? So here we have nothing. Let's hit a key. Now, let's put neighboring zone round robins. That means that notes are going to be used on top of this sample, pitched down so it matches it. Listen. It sounds different. It's phasing a little bit. It's almost like a chorus effect. It sounds like there's more players being on. It has a fatter sound. You can do the layers like 2 notes up or 2 notes down. And it sort of create different sounds and textures that way. Sometimes when you use too much of it, it tends to phase too much, but it can really have even a bigger ensemble feel, especially for single notes. So let's take a look at single instruments. Let's do the alto sax. And what you can see here is that now you don't have different combinations, obviously, but a few different articulations. So here you have long notes. This works exactly the same as the combination. But we also have soft, and that means that the louder layer is not included. Then we have growl, which is very nice if you want that nasty sound. chatter is cool. You can just hold one note down and see what happens, but I like to just randomly hit a few keys. And it just creates this random cacophony, which is very, very popular in specifically more postmodern dramas, crazy traffic scene, or a couple arguing or something like that. And there's an option of that, which is called layered chatter. It works the same, but on the lower dynamic layers, you also get long notes. And then have the chatter on top. It just does something to you. Then we have something I really like. It's a live performance. It's supposed to be a patch that you can do everything with. Short and long notes, chords and all that. It's a little bit easier to play melodies with this one as well, because the attack is a little bit quicker here. And then something really nice here is rounded short. Now you can do shorts quite well with the other patches, but this gives a nice round end to it. And it's quite a long one. It's a Mercado. I also love it that each note ends a little bit differently. You get that live feeling. All of the solo instruments work pretty much the same here. We can check out the recorder as well. You see the long and soft are there, but you also now have bend vibratos. Then we also have chips. Flutter. Jungle movies, anyone? Okay, we can try one more here. Flugelhorn. Baked in a performance, this works really well as a melody instrument. Just be careful how you play it. I wouldn't do a lot of fast passages. But I find that you play it quickly, it doesn't work as well. There's no built-in legato. All the brass instruments have something called brassy performance. That means that there's a quicker swell included. And in the shorts as well. So it's a normal short. And the brassy short. Let's take a look a little bit at the mic options. You don't have a lot this time, but you don't need it. There's a great mix going on in the tree, and you can get quite a bit done by removing the tree or the close or doing half of each or any combination. What you can do here with these is basically controlling the samples. I usually keep it as it is. Tightness is basically where the samples start, and it's pretty good as it is. But if you don't care where the samples start at all, if you don't want to be super tight rhythmically, then I would go all the way to the left, because then you get all that juicy transient sound in the instrument themselves, and you can always move the samples later if you feel like they're not as tight. Then you have a few interesting reverbs here, and I think they are convolution reverbs. Could be wrong. I don't actually know how the Spitfire engine works, but they sound really great, and you can create a bigger sound quite easily. So what's the verdict? What do I think about this library? Well, I do really like it, but it did take me a little while to get the hang of it, because it doesn't behave as a normal virtual instrument. For example, you don't use the mod wheel to control the dynamics with it, as you do with most libraries in the long notes, in ensemble patches, in sustain patches, and so on. Here, it's actually only the velocity layer that really decides what kind of texture you're gonna get. But actually, you realize it's really clever, because let's say you have a nice long chord. Not only can you get different swells that are built in, different patterns and sounds that make the chord interesting for a long while, but you can also decide how you want that chord to be arranged in a way. If you hit the top note really hard. You can hear that top note really well, and that would be sort of the melody line, you can say. But you can decide now, I don't want the top note, I want it to be there, but not so loud, so you hit it more softly, or you change it in your DAW, right? And then you say, well, the middle note or the bass note needs to be the foreground play here, so I can just hit a little bit harder, and I get a different texture, and it's more present. It's such a small thing, but it really makes a difference in terms of how you arrange your music, because you can decide so much where you want to happen in that chord. Now, I also want to say that if you had your own studio, you have some pretty decent mics and some good players around, you could do this library yourself quite easily. But for us mortals that don't have those things, it's quite nice to buy this package from Spitfire, because that's basically what you get. You get a bunch of really beautiful, emotional, textured notes performed by great players, and they really work well together. And it's not so much about clever scripting and articulations and legato lines. And in fact, you can't really play melodies with this library. It's more of what I call a texturizer. Now, you can do some melodies, but they have to be slow and long and not too much going on, because then you will hear it's a sample library, but it's not intended that way. If you need more advanced lines, I would rather have a different instrument on top entirely. But otherwise, it's just perfect to put really nice, beautiful chords or long notes even that are all interesting. And this is a media composer's dream, because most virtual libraries, they're a little bit stale. You know, you have to make sure they don't go face. They are perfectly tuned and all that, and you tend to kill the liveness of the instrument, where you have to make sure that all the samples work perfectly with everything else and the legatos. Here, each note is sort of a performance, and then you can just hold it in and interesting things happen. So it's not just one note, it's also the swell, it's also maybe a pattern, the breathing, all that stuff. And that makes motion. Motion creates emotion, as I always said. If you need textures, very beautiful, organic, real sounding, realistic textures for perhaps media, or it could be textures for any other work, this is a good addition to have. And also the other libraries, you might want to consider those. It's quite a simple library, but you can get a lot of beautiful sounds from it. So it's a recommendation from me for sure. So that's it for this time. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do want to support me, as I mentioned before, then please hit the like and subscribe if you want more videos like this. Write a comment, recommend other people about what I do here. And if you want to help me a little bit, push me along as I create more content and the courses for you, then perhaps considering becoming a patron or give me a thanks. All the links are below. So until next time, hope you write a lot of music and take care.